We're halfway through the day. It's a 3-day weekend. Thank you all for coming. A couple of housekeeping kinds of things. I'm confined to this area. My wife wishes that we had this technology at home where she could confine me to a small space. Normally I would like to wander around, but they're recording it, so I'm kind of confined right here, and I was telling Jennifer, I was voted best hair. I should have shared this actually. We're at something where we were sharing something no one else knew about us, and I should have shared that I actually was voted best hair, and I'm trying to live back up to that reputation as I am in the latter stages of my life rather than when I was 17. But that's when mullets were in style. There are photos if you can never find them. Anyway, thank you for coming. A couple other things. Let's see. There's a sign-up sheet going around, so if you could sign up, that would be spectacular. We're trying to just get a sense of how effective are we in trying to spread some of the information around. There's some information in the back that's not directly related to what I'm talking about. There have been, and is continuing, a series of information sessions really centered around, I think, how to get involved in guided pathways. That Jennifer and Jen have been leading, and that's the information from some of that. So feel free to take that with you when you go, but it's not really directly related to what I'm talking about here. And if you are interested in learning more about how you can get involved, I highly encourage you to go to one of those information sessions or shoot Jennifer or Jen an email, and we're more than happy to try to keep people engaged. So, thanks for coming. This is supposed to be a repeat of something I did in December. I can't even remember what I did yesterday, so this might be entertaining. So I'll do the best I can to not stray too far from the script, but where things have maybe changed or whatever, I'll try to update that a little bit. So welcome to Guided Pathways Forum. Our motivation for having this forum and others like this as we continue is really to try to engage participation. We know that, you may know or you may not know, we are engaged in a process of walking down a little bit of a guided pathways path as part of one of the pilot colleges in the state of Oregon. In the Guided Pathways project for the state of Oregon, and that project's based on a national project, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. Our neighbor to the north, Lynn Benton, was part of that cohort. So many of you are probably familiar with some of the things that have happened at Lynn Benton, and part of that is an initiative. So that's really our goal, is really just information, engagement, and participation. And that's going to be our goal for the next few years as we keep talking about some things that are related to Guided Pathways. So my goals for the afternoon are really, as I mentioned, just engagement, but I want to talk a little bit about why Guided Pathways and why now. Many of you have probably, I know I just came from talking with the science division, and I have no shame and whatever in talking about where we are as an institution and owning the data that we have and asking questions and having conversations about, is that okay, is that not okay, and how could we maybe do things different to improve something. So that's really the why Guided Pathways and why now, and the review of Lane's data. Lane's data is really last year's data, although we do have some information coming out of fall. We're still just trying to vet those numbers before we make them too public, but I can give you a little bit of insight into fall and winter data as well. I want to talk a little bit about what does it mean to be a Guided Pathways college. That's a weighted, depending upon what group on campus, employee group on campus you might be in, or whether you're a student or whatever, being a Guided Pathways college means different things to different people. And I just want to be clear about what I think it means to be a Guided Pathways college. I want to talk a little bit about some of the past work that's been done on campus. Many of you were involved in a lot of this work that is very consistent with Guided Pathways frameworks and conversations about that. I want to talk a little bit about how you can get involved, but I want to really try to, I didn't do a good job with this. My memory is if my memory is correct, in December it's saving a lot of time because I have a tendency to talk too much. For a question and answer, I do want to really try to make that happen because I want to just address issues. Those of you that know me and have worked with me, I think that's the single most important thing we can do, is have conversations and to have questions and to be upfront and honest with each other about the work we have to do. So that's kind of my goal, and then hopefully through participation towards the end, we can get some other kinds of goals that come out of this through dialogue and questions that come about. I want to mention a little bit, tie this into kind of like big picture kinds of things. We did have at in-service that's September. Gosh, it seems like forever. In September with fall in-service, we did have a little bit of a conversation about some of the strategic priorities and directions that we want to take at this institution. Obviously, all of those are consistent with our core themes and our mission. One of them was guided pathways, and I think maybe we spent less than 2 minutes talking about that as a bullet point, but really it's the results that we're after. And I don't care what we call things, these are the results we really want to look for. We want to increase student enrollment, right? We want to make sure that we're serving our community. We want to really look at increasing student retention. In my mind, that's the single most important thing that we can do, or I hope to be engaged in my time here, is retention, because that results in success for the students, right? Allows them to use the education for what's next, a job, a transfer, a degree, or whatever. We need to retain them for that. Okay. And also, I think something that you'll hear me preach about a lot also is I want every student to have the same opportunities. And we know that we have, community colleges have the most diverse student body of any educational institution that there is, certainly any higher ed institution. A colleague of mine at Pasadena City College, who went on to be the chancellor of the state system in the California community college system, to say that, well, you know, community colleges, we accept the top 100% of applicants, and that's true, right? But the thing about that is it's a challenge because there's no norm, right? And so it is important to recognize that and to have structures in place that can address that fact that we do accept the top 100%, and we want we want an ability across that top 100% to realize their expectations when they step in the front door. We should have a structure in place that kind of facilitates that. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about why guided pathways and why now. And many of you know this information already, but I just want to provide a little bit of context. When I first applied for this job, I was looking at some of the educational struggles in the state of Oregon, and there are many. They're financial, but they're really completion. The state of Oregon has one of the lowest high school completion rates in the country. Also, probably not too surprising, we have one of the lowest per capita investments in students in education in the country. I would argue that those two might be related to each other somehow. But nonetheless, right, the state, and by that I mean the politicians within the state, would argue, have realized that we need to have an educated populace in the state of Oregon. Certainly, if we're going to provide for the workforce demands of the future, we need to have an educated workforce. On the right shows you just a snapshot of that decade, the 25 to 34-year-olds, what the educational attainment is, and this I think was a few years ago, 2014 maybe, or 15, what the educational attainment is of the population. And you can see that about a third had a bachelor's degree or higher, but we also had almost as many that didn't have any college credential. And we know that the work that is occurring is increasingly more dependent upon training, and that most of that training, some of it can occur in high school, but some of it cannot, requires some post-secondary training. So they put a goal out that I can't remember the year, was it 2012? I don't remember what year it was, but anyhow, the aspiration was 40% bachelor's degrees, 40% have an associate degree, and 20% would have a high school diploma as our goal. And I want to look at also, not only, and this is actually the larger population, not just that decade, but if you look at adults that are 25 or older, so these should be in the workforce for the most part, nobody's close to 40-20, and in the state of Oregon, depending upon what demographic you fall in by here, and I would also put on here, it would be interesting if we could superimpose onto this, maybe I'll pull that data and show you, if we did this by zip code, it's a real similar kind of pattern, which is really a shame also. There's really drastic differences. And one thing that I want you to focus on in the middle there is the Hispanic population. We are going to be seeing over the next few years, right, an increasing proportion, and you have seen an increasing proportion of Hispanic students coming in. I remember when I was at Pasadena, I started teaching there in '96. We were predominantly a Caucasian campus in 1996. We went in probably the early 2000s to a predominantly Asian American or Asian descent campus. And when I left, we were predominantly Hispanic, right? So you can imagine in that my career there for 20 years, those are very different challenges that we have to address with very different populations of students. And do you think that the institution did a great job at keeping up with that? How nimble are our institutions? Not so much. We tried really hard, and I think we did do some good work in Pasadena, but it's really hard as an institution to be nimble to keep up with changes like that. And we're on the verge here of one of those changes. There are a couple community colleges in the state of Oregon now that are Hispanic serving institutions, and I think if we did our job better, we would be a Hispanic serving institution as well. So we'll see some of those demographic changes, but look at the educational attainment. Doesn't quite seem fair to me, right? And I think as a community college, one of our goals is if we're going to try to hit that 40% that have an associate's degree, we're going to have to address that many different ways because we have all of those people. We have the top 100%, right? We have all of those populations of students coming, and we have to be able to address their unique needs. And again, you all are educators. I respect your opinions. You know that, right? But we have to have conversation I just had with Paul Ruscher and his crowd over in the sciences. We have to have the institutional will to be able to acknowledge that and do something about it, right? This is the reality and why it's important. Well, and again, you all know this, work is increasingly more and more complex, right? The average work is becoming more and more complex. And the availability of jobs that are going to be out there for individuals that are coming with just a high school diploma is shrinking, right? So we have to be able to address that. That just shows the kind of education of the workforce over the past 25 years or so, and it's changing. It's increasingly more complicated work that requires more and more training. I think I read something that I think the number was 40% or something like that of all the anticipated job openings in the state of Oregon over the next decade will require some kind of college, not a bachelor's degree, but some college training. And that's a big number. That's a big number. So how good of a job are we doing is the question I want to address. This shows my apologies. I was never a PowerPoint teacher, so I'm not real good with PowerPoint. I like the board. This is probably what you should not do if you're teaching, is put something up there that's so small like that. But the point I want to make, and again, I can't really, I'd have to get out. If you could see Oregon on there, you don't really have to scan too much. Look towards the bottom. On the left shows, so this is 6-year outcomes. A long time, 6-year outcomes. So these are the students that entered college in the fall of 2010. So I realize my data are a little old, but the students that entered college in the fall of 2010 that indicated that their goal was a completion of a degree of some kind or some college credential. They weren't coming, in other words, they weren't coming for just personal enrichment. There was a goal. Oregon sits at the bottom, down there, second from the bottom. I can't really brag too much. I spent 20-some years in California. What's up with different set of problems. We're not talking about California. But Oregon, second from bottom. So that's about, I think it's 34% or so of students that came in the fall of 2010 that indicated that they had some goal of a certificate or degree. I think it's like 34% or something like that got one after 6 years. What about completing a community college award? Well, if we ask the questions, how many of those students completed? Again, you don't have to strain your eyes too much. Look down there, I kind of highlighted there, 27%. 27% of those students that started in 2010 in the 6 years had completed some credential at a community college. That's not just a degree. I mean, that could be a certificate there. And then what about a bachelor's degree? 8%. And if you remember, the aspirational goal for Oregon, 40% of our population is going to have a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree. We have work to do, right? We have work to do. Now, let me comment on this. Let me preface that a little bit. I am fully aware, I take that back, not fully aware. I have spent a lot of time in community colleges, and I feel I have a reasonable understanding of who our students are and what their needs are. I believe that. Okay? I'm not an expert, but I believe I have an understanding. I do feel, I'm not pointing, there are some things that we don't have control of, and I understand that. I'm also not willing to accept that there aren't some things we do have control over, that we, if we had the will and the capacity to address, might be able to change those numbers, right? And like I said, I'm a realist. I know we can't do can't fix everything. But if it's if it's something that we're doing, I think there are some things that we could do differently. And maybe we can have a conversation, or hopefully we'll have conversations about what those are. Even the students who are successful. Now this is California. My apologies, it's the data that I was the most familiar with when I put this together and the most readily available to me. This is California, so these are semester units, right? An associate's degree on semester units should be in the neighborhood of 60 units, right? Should be in the neighborhood of 60 units. The comparable on the quarter system would be 90, right? Of completers in 2015-16 in the state of California, so there's, anybody know how many community college students there are in the state of California? 2 million, 2.2 million students, 114 community colleges, right? So a big number, there's a big pool behind this. So this is not anecdotal, this is real information here. Those are the most completers in 2015-16, okay, for this particular cohort. And get a look at the number of units that the average completer had. Mathematics, wow, that's hard. But 99 units, right? What was our number? 60. I'm not real good at math, but that should be about 30 a year. And take some of these other ones. English, sociology, humanities, history. 77. 60 is our number, right? Now, here's the big if. If a student was going to school full-time, how many of our students go to school full-time? And by that I mean full-time by completion is 15 credits a term. You know the number here, Elaine? I'll show it to you here in a minute. You know the number of students that even just enroll in 15 units a quarter? It's about 8%. You know your students, most of them take how many? 12? Not even most take 12. 6 to 9 a term? So the 99, that's probably about an extra 3 years for a student if the average credit taking, if that pattern persists, right? What's the likelihood of an average student being able to do that? You know your student. What's the likelihood? Not great, is it? Not great. So there's also something, and I would say we do have some control over this, right? Not all control, I get it. Not all control. We know students don't come ready for college math and English. I get it, right? Students change majors, they make decisions. I get it. But I would guess that students don't make a year and a half worth of bad decisions. I really don't think that, you know. And again, I think we could control some of that. I'll show you some of Elaine's data here in a few minutes. So when we look at this, and when I talk about a guided pathways movement, when we look at this, you know, we look at these 3-year metrics or these 6-year metrics, these 6-year outcome kinds of things, And it's really hard to be nimble and react to indicators that are 6 years away or a cohort that started 6 years before us. We know things change over a period of 6 years quite a bit. So we're really trying to look at what are the indicators we could begin to center around that might allow us to make decisions that we can measure in a short amount of time or see changes in a short amount of time. And by that I mean in a year or less. So we should have things that indicate the likelihood that a student could be successful, and I can measure that within a year of that student's study, and I can make decisions in a timely manner that might actually impact that student's life cycle while they're here. And that's really what we're looking at. They allow us to be more responsive. And these are what they are. They're key performance indicators. There are these early momentum things. Just, if we look at students' likelihood to be successful is really dependent upon the number of units they take, the number of units they complete. Okay? That's a big part of it. We know also that their ability and the timeliness within which they complete gateway courses, and by that I'm largely focusing on college level English and math. We know that's really indicative as well. It's students that complete college level math and English in their first year are far more likely to be successful in the long run than students that wait. Right? And many students wait, and they wait for different reasons, or they start at a developmental level that might be 3 levels below college level in something like this. And again, just by looking at the likelihood of them being able to be successful and come here 4 terms in a row to finally get to or complete college level, that's low. Right? I mean, that's a tough path because life happens. Now,
is this slide still in the semester credits?
Again?
Is that still in the semester? So it's actually 40.
These are semester credits here. Yeah, sorry. These are semester credits. Yeah. So that would be for us, those numbers are going to be times 1.3 or whatever. Yeah, right. So that let's move together. Persistence from term to term. How well do students persist from fall to winter to spring? How well do they persist from fall to fall? Okay, our students, how likely are they to come back in the second year? And then the other things that we know about, just the course completion, the college level course completion rate for a group, and then the likelihood that they can complete a certain number of units that might be considered full-time a year. These are semesters, so that's 15 credits per term or 30 credits per year. That would be 15 per term here and 45 units per year. And well, I'll get to that. Let me tell you our student story. And many of you know it better than I do. I don't pretend to be an expert, but I want to show you the data and then have a conversation about the data. And I want us to try to not question it. I'm always one for questioning data, but that's not the exercise here. Let's assume that these numbers are accurate. Or after all, the numbers we're reporting to the state. So let's assume that they're accurate, okay? And let's not get hung up on that. And then we can have a conversation about what the numbers might mean. Okay? So let's think about this in terms of those some of those early momentum metrics that we talked about before, and we can get a sense of who our students are. So here are our students. This is a cohort of students that were first-time in college students in 2017. And let's ask the question, this is in a quarter, fall, of what they are. So you can see there are the number of credits that they took. The magic number to be full-time is what? Depends. Would a student graduate in 2 years if they took 12 units a term?
No.
No, how long would it take them? 3, right? That's what financial aid, we use that for financial aid measures to be considered full-time. For a student to complete in 2 years, if they're capable, we're looking at 15 units. So there's our students. The bulk of our students are in that middle range there in terms of units attempted. Very few students attempt 15 or more credits, only 8%. And then look at how successful they are in earning units. Now, what you'll notice is there's a shift from the high end to the low end, right? So that if we look at a total percent full-time, but that's 12 or more units is what I'm using here, we start out with over half of our students attempting to be 12 or more units, but we get down to about 30% being successful in completing that. For any number of reasons, right? But that's just where they are. So we lose some there. By the way, the average pass rate for that cohort was 72%, okay, in terms of units attempted and units earned. What about for a year? How do they fare in a year? Well, assuming we keep them, this is their credit-taking behavior. One thing that's kind of noticed right off the bat, this is not unique to Lane, students have an intention of trying to be full-time, right? So in the fall, we have a greater percentage of students that are trying to be full-time. But over the course of the year, life happens, or whatever, very few students make it, or fewer students, right? Only about a third of them would be considered full-time over the course of the year. So again, that's a piece of information I think we can talk about and work with down the road, is that we know many more students come here with the idea that they can be full-time. They try to be. Something happens, or not. I think that's an opportunity for us to ask, well, what are some of those things that are in our control, and what are some of those things that are out of our control, right? To be able to address that. Okay? And again, the average pass rate now across the year, a little bit lower, 67%. Again, units attempted, earned. So what about retention? This is one of the things I care a lot about, because this speaks directly toward, if you can't retain a student, they're not going to be successful in the what's next, right? So here we are from fall to winter. This is over 2009. These are students that come in the fall that say they have an intention of getting some kind of award. So all of our awards are at least more than one quarter. So have the intent to be here in winter, right? And it's about 75, 76, 77%. It's kind of hovering, right? There's probably not a huge difference. We did see, I think we had more students during the time on the left over there, obviously, so maybe that had something to do with it. But I would say in general, there's really no huge difference here. If you had to argue anything, maybe it's ticked down just a little bit. It's not really all that huge, but that's 77 to 80%. So in that range is kind of where we've been a lot of significant movements. I would say, however, that I think over that past, decade, we've had conversations on this campus about how to improve that. We haven't seen a lot of movement, right? What about fall-to-fall retention? This is where the numbers really kind of drop off a little bit. This is a student coming in the fall who has the intention, I think, to get an award. Again, some of these are successes that we lose. I don't want to belabor that, right? I mean, we do have some year-long certificates. Some of those students transfer in a year, and those should not be viewed as failures, but I'll show you some data in a minute too. That number is 47%. I had so much fun last fall, well, just this last term, welcoming the Oregon Promise students, 660 some kids, right? Well, there's not 660 in the winter, right? And next fall, there might be 330, right? Something like that. Right? Again, not blaming. Some of that we have no control over. I would argue some of that we do have control over. Right? We just need to figure out what it is and be willing to address it. So where do we, I don't want to, and again, I really hope that when I bring these, I remember nobody likes to be critical of themselves or have somebody else be critical of their capabilities. I'm not trying to do that. I really hope you don't think I'm trying to say, well, I mean, I've only been here, 6 months. I'm not trying to say, I love this institution. I think we do some great work. I think you all do wonderful work. I'm just trying to put some data out there to have a conversation about. So I really hope nobody feels defensive or blaming. If we feel defensive or you feel like somebody's blaming you, we're never going to be productive, right? So we're really in this together. We're trying to move the needle a little bit. But let me show you where we are relative to some of our peers as an institution, okay? There we are with national averages, fall-to-fall retention rates. I don't think these are, I'm trying to recall, I do think these are all community colleges, two-year colleges that have pulled these numbers from. And so nationally, it's a little bit better than 50%. Oregon is right about where Lane is, right? Right around 50%. So we're not unique in the fall-to-fall retention piece. That's kind of standard. And it's not that different from, you know, California wasn't that either. And that shows you some of the states in terms of the retention, the fall-to-fall retention there. And that's actually an interesting conversation. And I had a conversation with somebody, I can't remember who it was, about one of the numbers, one of the days. Oh, I remember it was at a Lane Foundation. The North Dakota at the top is an interesting kind of thing, and we can have a sidebar.
South Dakota.
Oh, was it South Dakota?
Dakota, very different. That's where she's from.
Yeah, of course you would point that out. One Dakota. Are they really different?
Yes, actually.
Well, we can talk about, you know, things to do in North Dakota. Yeah, they study a lot. It's cold. They study. Yes.
Would you let me just comment on what South Dakota does?
Please.
So they don't have community colleges like we do. They
True.
tend to have technical schools that might have some gen ed courses that transfer. One of the things they do is they do testing and tracking up front. So a student gets there, they test them and they say, you know, you maybe want to go into, you know, into computers, but we don't think you have the aptitude. We're gonna encourage you to do something else. So they use a lot of stuff that I think would appall us.
I'm not trying to be South Dakota.
No, I'm just saying, and the other thing is the population is incredibly homogeneous. It's very
True.
small.
I think that's a
They
big
have
piece of
8
it.
technical colleges in the
Yeah.
state. And I grew up there, and one of the flagship technical colleges in the state is in my hometown. And they won an Aspen Award a couple years ago for rate at completion. And so I spent a lot of time looking at what they were doing, and it was really pushing people into fields of once they determined it was aptitude.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to, point well taken, point well taken. Not trying to do that.
And it's cold there. And it's cold there. And it's not.
And it's cold there. And I think it's cold here. All right.
Cold there.
So let's look at some completion data, and I'll come back to some of the retention pieces in a minute within the state. So that'll be a little bit different reference point for us. So let's look at completion. So if we look at 3-year completion rates, these are a cohort that started in fall of 2014 and a cohort that started in fall of 2015. If you look at the completion rates there to graduation and transfer to the extent that the numbers could be pulled from the clearinghouse, 11% of our students in 2014, 13% of the cohort in 2015, that's something in 3 years. Okay. In terms of transferring out, about 20% of that cohort in 2014 transferred out, and about 19% in 2015 transferred out. So that's the transfer and completion there. And the graduation group also includes certificate leaders as well, just AA degrees. It's certificate leaders as well. Here are the 17 community colleges. Same data, same thing they submit to the state and the federal government. Same way. This is where we sit, that cohort that started in 2014, 3-year rate, relative to our peers in the state of Oregon. And I've highlighted in red the lowest performing in that particular area and in green the highest performing. And I realize that not all community colleges are the same. And if you are a small community college in some areas in Oregon, a family moving in and out of town can make a big difference. Right? I get that. Okay. So they're all not the same. But this is where we are relative to our group of community colleges in Oregon. So on average in Oregon for graduation rates, those 3-year completion is about 19%. As I mentioned, we were 11% in this cohort. We were 13% in the cohort after this. We probably could even look at the 2015, 2016. No, we can't look at the 2016 cohort yet. Okay. So we are ticking upwards, and I think that number was less than 11% the prior year before. So we are moving in the right direction with that. With transferring out, so these are students that from that cohort that have enrolled at a 4-year institution. And you can see our number there at Lane, we're about 22% for this cohort, right on average with the state. Interestingly enough, if you look at some of our peers, we're kind of similar with our peers as well. Okay, in terms of the institutions of similar size is what I'm going at. You see the big differences. These are small institutions where things make a big difference.
Does that also count if the student transfers to community college, like in pre-nursing?
I don't think so. Malloy, do you know the IPEDS data?
The IPEDS rate, so I don't.
Yeah, I don't think it captures that. That would be a good thing for me to know. I'll find that out. And then if we look at the retention rates, you can see that we're right around 46 to 50%, something like that is where we are. We're similar with the state of Oregon, and there is a pretty big range there. Interesting, and I would dig a little bit deeper. Mount Hood is a large institution, and their fall-to-fall retention rates are pretty high. I don't think this is just a blip. It's vetted data, but it would be worth a further look there. So I can't really speak much to what that is. So this is just kind of where we are relative to other institutions that are comparable. What can we do? So, and here is, it's an interesting piece I just threw up here. These are number of credits in the group that completed in 2018 at Lane. These are the average number of credits that those individuals that had that award completed. Now, mind you, these are only credits they earned here. Right? They transferred in credits or had credits from somewhere else. That's not reflected here. These are only Lane credits. Well, obviously that must be true. The one completer we had in the computer science only had 72 units. Those were Lane Community College units, so they had units from something else. But again, you can kind of look at there, that number should be in the 90-ish range, right? And we're pretty high on some of them. We're pretty high on some of them. Yeah?
Strip out developmental ed credits, because I know in the fall presentation, this included developmental.
I did not take them out.
Okay.
I wanted to do the same thing. The next presentation you get from me, we'll pull them out.
Okay.
Yeah. Or actually what we'll do, we'll present it in a way that they're disaggregated. Because I think that's an important piece. Yes. Depending upon where you're starting makes a difference. Because this does include developmental ed credits. Okay? So take a look at that. That's who we were there. And now let's think about what we can do and about some of that. I mean, we can accept the numbers and we can talk about validity of them and things like that later, but the numbers are what they are. I do think that there's some things, and again, I don't think this is unique to Lane by any means, but there are some things that are in our control that can speak to some of those statistics that we can improve some of those a little, right? That's all I'm trying to say is that I think there's some things we do have control over, some things we totally don't have control over. But we owe it to our students, I think, to at least try to address the things that we can identify that we have some control over for their benefit. This is our students increasingly see really like that, a maze of how to navigate a system, especially as you see the shifting demographic, students becoming more and more first generation, less family knowledge and history to help them navigate. This is what they see. And so many of our students, I don't have the history here, but from my experience as a teacher and an administrator in California, so many of our students, it's a hard choice for them to make to get here that first term, right? And that really, my feeling is that that should be the toughest thing for them to have to do, is to hear that first term. Their lives are so complicated that any excuse that they can use or they can put in front of them to make the choice not to come back or to leave, they often take that, right? And while that at that point in time to that student might seem like a logical thing to do, we all know in the long run that's not a logical thing to do. So we need to try to minimize the maze effect, right? And it's as simple as, which parking lot do I park in? We had a conversation this morning about the campus and a facilities master plan for the campus and parking lots and which way do you enter from and whatever. It is a maze if you walk, just walking through our campus and wayfinding, right, is a maze many times. And to tell a student, I still ask, what is the building that gives me? I always have to pause when I think about going to buildings like 12 and 15 and over that way, right? Because I have to stop and think, because that's not my reality. I don't spend a lot of time in that area, right? So I always have to stop and think. And I look for signs to help me find my way, and sometimes they're helpful. I think we also need to start asking ourselves, what is it? What's the information that students want to know and need to know to be successful, right? I don't know, I'll just put these up because I don't want to belabor it too much. I don't know how much time we spend talking to students about their career options. We used to have a career center. Don't know how effective it was. I wasn't here.
We still do.
Still do.
Looks different than before.
Looks different than before. I've always been a believer that the first stop a student makes somewhere, it should be hopefully in high school or even junior high, should be that conversation about career and career centers and help, drive some choices on that. Do we spend a lot of time clarifying to students how do they get to those careers? Or do we say, here's a catalog, there's a program of study, pick something, you have to pick something. How often do we ask, they picked something when they came that was a study, they're going to be accounting because it's an A. Do they still have that same goal? Do we ask along the way? Do we provide lots of opportunity and guidance for that? I don't know. What courses do they need to take? How long is it going to take? And most importantly, how much will it cost me? Will my credits transfer? Those counselors in the room and advisors in the room, you get that question a lot, don't you? And some of our students take a lot of credits that don't transfer, don't they? Yeah. Sometimes that's okay. Sometimes it's something we may have done along the way, and we should minimize that. And the one on the bottom is really an important one. Who do I talk to? Who do I talk to get useful information? Accurate information, good information. On the first day of fall term, I was standing outside of the in between building 3 and building 4 with the students were coming in before, and I know now that I sent at least half a dozen people to the wrong side of campus for the questions they asked me. I'll own that one. Hopefully next time I'll give better advice. So those are the things really that led to, for lack of a better way to describe it, what we call the guided pathways of movement. I hate the word initiative because those come and go and we hate them. And I also don't like the word, I don't like a guided pathways college. That bothers me because that implies there is this thing called guided pathways that you could purchase and then implement, and you would be a guided pathways college. And that's not true, right? That's not true. So just a little brief history. Guided pathways actually have been around forever. Most of us were probably on a guided pathway, and we didn't know it. It wasn't called that when we were in college. I remember, going to school as a biology major, and here's what you take, and oh yeah, you get to take a history quarter of that term or whatever, right? I mean, most of us had, many of us, I shouldn't say most, many of us had a similar experience to that. And so these aren't totally novel, but what's interesting is that at community colleges in particular, this is a novel concept. if you look at curriculum at community colleges relative to universities, we have oftentimes twice as many offerings. There's a reason for that. I'm not saying it's all bad, right? We have twice as many offerings, twice as many programs than they have at universities. There, like I said, there's a reason for that. I'm not saying that's bad, but we tend to have a lot of opportunity. First sort of projects that occurred in community colleges were with the American Association of Community Colleges, AACC. There were 30 select colleges across the country. Glen Benton was one of them. This was a couple years ago. And it was really, the goal was to, most of this was funded by private money, and the goal was to really try to rethink the way a student experiences a college so that it is really intentful, meaning that their structure to our academic programs and our student support programs, and we're going to provide that structure at scale, right? Does anybody know do we have programs on campus where there are 80% retention, probably 80 to 90% completion? Do we have programs on campus where certain cohorts of students meet those? We do, yeah, right. I mean, Trio STEM, there's probably others, right? Athletics is another one, and there are similarities to those. There are reasons why they're successful, but the point is, how do you provide that at scale, right? How does every student have that opportunity, not just the lucky ones that stumble into it or whatever, or many times talk to the right person at the right time. This project on a smaller scale has been repeated at a number of different states across the country. California embarked on this 2 years ago. 20 out of the 114 colleges were chosen to be part of a state project in California modeled after the AACC project. Oregon started that this year. 5 of the 17 colleges were chosen to be part of that inaugural cohort there. Lane was one of them. Applied was selected and has participated there. And basically what those projects are designed to do is to help colleges navigate the conversations on campus about making changes to improve some of those statistics that we were looking at there. And as I mentioned, Lane's one of them. And we've been I didn't go to the first one, was last May. The second one was in November. The third one is in May. And then the fourth one is, I think, next year sometime. Maybe November. Yeah. And I think, is it here? Is it here? Not that one? Okay. All right. So, guided pathways, what does it mean to be a guided pathway college? It's really about structure, about making decisions from a student-centric point of view. And I think more importantly, it's really about, these are the, I'll put these up here, but these are the what are considered the 4 pillars of guided pathways. If you look at the things, we do things in all of these, right? But it's really about clarifying what the path is for a student. How do they complete, right? What is that path? Are we clear with that? How many of our programs who's real familiar with our college catalog? I'm not, but who's real familiar with it? How many of our programs in our college catalog inform students of what order within which they should take things in order to be successful? All of them?
Small.
No, some of them do. I don't know the number. Well, I hope it's more than 0. But I think that's a big piece, right? A student has a right to know, how do I get this degree, right? You're the experts in the room. Inform me of how I'm going to be successful. During the path, right? This is onboarding students, right? Are we efficient in the way we get students through the front door and onto that program of study? Or is there work to do from the time that they may first interact with this college through the website or something like that, being able to register for a class? I just did it with my wife a couple days ago. It wasn't fun. Actually, I have to commend the application, because the application is good, straightforward, minimum number of steps, you can apply. Right. The hard part is from that point to getting in a class, right? And some things we got to do because we got to do, I get it. But I think there are some things in there that are a little bit too cumbersome. Right? And so the question is, are there things in that onboarding process that we could maybe smooth out a little bit? And I'm a realist. I realize some of it is just having the resources to do it. I get that. I'll get that. But some of it also is, I think, just having the will to be able to think about how you can change something. Staying on the path, do we have really intent counseling and advising to keep students on the path? And more importantly, does that advising and counseling to students come at the right time? Right? When you look at for programs where we do have it mapped out, where students should take these classes in this order, do we put in there what are some key things that they should do with advising and counseling along the way? Maybe not, unless they have a hold or something and they don't know why. They call somebody else, and they try to get it removed. You know, I don't think we do a good job of informing students. Again, I'm not blaming. I'm just making an observation. And then I think this is where, you know, many of us that teach feel, how do you know your students are learning? Funny, I ask this question every time I interviewed faculty to hire. I always ask this question: how do you know if your students have learned anything? That's something we spend our lives in the classroom educating students, but the reflection of how do you know if your students have learned anything? It's interesting when you ask a group of people that spend their lives engaged in that, around that. That's a great conversation to have. It's a great conversation to have. And I don't want to get stuck in assessment and things like that, but that's a great conversation to have about how you know if your students have learned something. And I think that piece is really important. But the thing I take away from that one is, how do we know that we are providing students with the right education and training to be successful at the what's next? If they're successful here, are we giving them what they need to be successful at what's next? And that's the ensuring learning. This is what it means to be, I guess, a guided pathways. So look, you have had Chris Jenkins come talk, had Rob Johnston come talk, and he's coming back in February. They are both equally passionate about this, present messages in very different ways. So you've heard some of this about what it means to be a guided pathways college, but it really speaks to what we've mentioned before, right? Those pillars. Do we show students clear ways to complete? Do we, those of you that are a faculty member in a class, right? You should be articulating to your students what it is to be successful in your class. As an institution, we should be able to communicate to our students, what does it take to be successful at this institution? So we have those kind of clear roadmaps. Have we thought about multiple points of entry into our programs? That's another issue we have, right? Or opportunity or challenge, however you want to look at it. We take the top 100%. Students come to us onto this path in multiple different ways, right? At the University of Oregon, it's much easier for them to design the on-ramp because there's this standard make and model coming on that on-ramp, right? They don't have the complexities we have. I'll also say they don't have the rewards we have if we're successful either. So we need to think about that, those multiple on-ramps, getting students on, having takes designed to meet them where they are and get them on path. And then do we track their progress? You mentioned that, Kate, before about, really tracking students. We don't really track individuals. We track cohorts maybe. We don't really track individuals. It is intensive. It's labor intensive to track students' progress, but to the extent that we have the human capital to do it, we should be in their face about this, about what do they need and are they being successful and are they staying on path. And then lastly, I think we really have to, and I think we do a good job of this for the most part, make sure that we know our outcomes are aligned. We know what it takes for students to be successful in the what's next because we've done our homework around that, and we have outcomes, and our curriculum is designed in a way to deliver those outcomes. And hopefully if we do that, we get less swirling of students hanging out here. We had a student when I was at Pasadena that had, again, mind you, 60 units as an associate's degree. She had 320 some units. And guess what? She said she was a transfer student. I don't know if she changed so many times or whatever, but something going on there. So we get less churn. We want to get students out as soon as we can. I take a little bit of Oregon's interesting for me because we have these initiatives going on right now for these, and some of you are more engaged in this than I am, these transfer agreements, I forget what they're called, or these major program maps or something like that. And you know what? They discourage students from completing a degree. And that's really wrong. We should be doing everything we can to encourage students to complete a degree in the fewest amount of units and relevant as possible. But we really shouldn't be encouraging students to get out as soon as they can. I'm just not a believer in that. You know the difference between a student, a transfer student, the likelihood of them completing a bachelor's degree if they have an associate's is transferring before they get an associate's. You know, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I remember the difference in percentage, 17 percentage points. 17 percentage points more likely to be successful at completing a bachelor's degree if they first get an associate's degree. That says something to me. So advisors, counselors out there, faculty, administrators, let's create structures to encourage students to complete. So you all probably know this, and I want to end here because I want to allow for some time for some commentary. You have to design with, and there's completion by design and all of that. You have to design with the end in mind. And that's really what we're doing when we want to look through here. We really want to look at this as the starting point. How are our structures, do we build them to facilitate that? Instead, we usually start here, and we work our way completing this way. And you have to realize that community colleges were based upon, not technical colleges, but community colleges that are multi-purpose or junior colleges are built upon a university model, right? A university model is built upon a centuries-old model. It hasn't really changed that drastically. Centuries-old model. Higher education was for the privileged and the elite, right? And we haven't changed the model that drastically. I would say we, as community colleges, we do better at that than other institutions do. But we really haven't drastically changed the model. Nor am I advocating that we have to really totally drastically change. But we really haven't changed things based upon that model in a long time. I mean, we're still built upon that education, the elite privilege model. So we really want to look at it. And if you all are like me, and I assume many of you are because you teach at community colleges and most of you made a conscious decision to be here, we admit the top 100%. I have to be perfectly honest. Where I find reward and what keeps me doing the work is not the top of that 100%, it's the bottom of that 100%, because the impact on them as a person and society as a whole is much greater if we can be successful at that end than being successful at the top end. But if that's true, then the institution has to be designed not for the top, which we are, right, but for the, I hate to use the word bottom because that's really judgmental, but you know what I mean. The lower part of the top 100%. If you get a chance to look at, there are bits and pieces of what we would call pathways colleges out there. There are bits and pieces, I think, that are some really good models out there. I'm fond of St. Petersburg now, we'll have a different conversation about, this is in Florida, and there's a reason why this is here in Florida, but look at that. That's what a student sees when they look at their catalog for what was the degree? Engineering technology, an AS in engineering technology. That's what they see, right? That's a much more user-friendly kind of model there. And also I think there's this movement or this tendency with pathways colleges to get away from calling things full-time and part-time, because that's kind of judgmental also. They often talk about on-plan or off-plan. A student has a plan. The plan may be a 3-year plan. That plan may be a 5-year plan. But we should do everything we can on their plan, whatever it is, right? And if you'll notice, what I like about this is not only does it have recommended courses that they should take together, how many of them they should take, but in the red there are key advising and counseling, student affairs kind of things that they should be engaged in along the way as well. So that integration between academic and student affairs and the ability to provide students with just-in-time resources, I think, is really recognized and something that's worthwhile. I'm going to say we. I think I probably said last term you all have done some great work, but I'll own it now because I've been here more than 100 days. We've done some fabulous work at this college. You all should be commended. Some of the work you've done, it's spectacular. These are some of the things that I would say are consistent with pathways form, if you will, and you've been doing them. You've been part of achieving the dream. There are increasingly more and more becoming similar guided pathways kinds of things when they go on those. One of the things that came out of that was this TIPS, timely information promoting student success, number 20-something. A lot of great information about students, some unpacking of data, some conversations around how we can be successful. We have career communities here. I think we can really continue to have conversations about the career communities, but we have career communities, 8 of them. You are looking actively at assessment reform. You are asking questions about, is there more than one way that we can recognize the likelihood that a student might be able to be successful in college level math or English? Now, mind you, when I say that, I think that we should be doing what we can to get students to that level as fast as we can, right? And in that level as soon as we can. I'm not saying that those students are prepared to be successful at it. So we need to rethink how we give them the support to be successful, right? And the old model is the leveled model, right, where they pass through levels to get to achieve outcomes and get to something. The other way of thinking of it is a concurrent model, right, where you provide that support. So there's still, our students still need support, and they're coming not prepared. I'm just saying that there's probably other ways we can provide them with the support they need in time to be successful. This year, we'll start having conversations about, can we do some things so that we do articulate to students the order within which they should take courses. And the next step from that is, okay, if we say this is the order the students should take classes in, are we scheduling them in that order? We went through this exercise at Pasadena, thought we were great. We did program maps for almost every degree we had and program we had. And then we did the work we got all the counselors in the room and we did the work to see what it would take for a student to go. We weren't even offering them in a way they could complete it, right? I mean, it was just impossible because the courses weren't offered. So, you don't know that until you ask the question. Right? You don't know that until you ask the question. These are our career communities if you're not familiar with them. We have organized the onboarding, at least for the Oregon Thomas crowd, around these career communities, and it's really a nice thing to see. If you haven't gone to the fall welcome day, is it welcome day? The fall welcome day, we've had it the past couple of years, go next fall. It really is a lot of fun. Beth and Jill organized that. It really is a lot of fun. I mean, part of it is it's fun for me because I'm out of the classroom and don't get to see students very often. That allows me to be with my students. I kind of like there. Again, some of the discussions that are happening around developmental education reform on campus. I want to say this, and this is a commitment. We have work to do. We do need to make some changes. We'll make some changes. Everybody on this campus should want to be part of the conversation about how we make the change, right? How can we better serve students? And I think that's our commitment when we talk about being a guided pathways college as part of the state program and having discussions around being a guided pathways college, is that we want to provide a platform to have these conversations so that we can make some change that matters, right? And it should be informed, it should be insightful, it should be student-centric. And I really hope that all of you participate in that. You get all your friends to come participate in that, because I really do think we need to work together for the good of our students. It's not okay with me, and I take responsibility. I've been part of the system as long as you have, just not at Lane. It's not okay with me that we sit back and say, this is the number that bothers me. 50% of our students that start this fall aren't here next fall. You know, a third of our students that were here this fall aren't here right now. Those are the things that just, they don't sit well with me. And I get that it's not 100%. I'm not asking it to be 100% because I know that's unrealistic. But that number needs to be better. doesn't need to be better just at Lane, it needs to be better across the institution. So it's not a lane blaming session, right? This is just the institutions can do better and need to do better. And I'm, for as long as I get fortunate enough to work here, that will always be my goal, is to challenge how good can we be, right? And to support you in the solution at providing more opportunities for our students. So, speaking of which, there are lots of opportunities for engagement. I think there have been communications that have come out about trying to form some committees and work groups around some of the work. I believe that we'll be planning with a few departments just as test subjects, some program mapping workshops, hopefully to roll those out. I think that we owe it to our students to be able to articulate patterns of course taking that are beneficial for them to be successful for any program. And there'll be lots of, we'll have some student focus groups, we'll have some lunch discussions and other information kind of groups. So this is what we should always be thinking about as we work. How well are our programs aligned with the opportunities that students come here wanting, right? How well are they aligned? Do we help them explore options? I think the biggest misconception with guided pathways work is that we don't allow students to explore. We have to allow students to explore. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grow up. I'm still trying to figure it out. But we have to provide a structure for that. We have to provide a structure for that. Because education was a lot, taking classes purely for exploration was a lot more affordable when we were students than it is now. And I think we have to recognize that. So we have to be good stewards of our students' money and taxpayers' money, structure that exploration in ways that make sense. Right? And you all are capable of figuring that out. Do we monitor students? Do we ensure that they're keeping on their plan? Do we give them nudges and whatever to say, hey, straying a little bit, maybe, why are you taking that? Maybe you should be taking it. Did you change your major? And the other thing is that, again, this speaks to the outcomes. Are we doing what we can to ensure that they're getting those skills and we're reinforcing those skills right, across the program so that they can be successful? So I thoroughly welcome your input, your criticism, okay, your willingness to think outside the box, because it's going to take all of us to try to make a difference. Because otherwise, 5 years from now, I'm going to be sitting here, maybe a different set of faces, right, doing another conversation, and we're going to still be looking at a line that hasn't changed much. And I just think this doesn't sit well. I think we can make a difference. We can do a little bit different. So with that, my apologies for talking so much. I warned you. I don't get to be a teacher much anymore. So, my hope is that you're part of the solution that we're trying to create, because I think your presence in that conversation really means. So with the time we have left, again, my apologies for talking a lot, but I do kind of enjoy it. I'm open for whatever questions, comments, suggestions, criticism, movie reviews. Yes.
Thanks for sharing all this information. It's very exciting. And I would like to hear more about this project teams you're working on, trying to put it together. And I'd like to hear more detail about what's happening, like what are the responsibility, how much commitment that. So
let me let somebody else answer that, because whatever I would say would be uninformed and not true. Jennifer Fry is leading that from a management side for the college, and Jen Kepka is last term as a faculty coordinator, director, leader, co-leader with Jennifer. So if you all want to address that, that would.
So in the interest of time, I don't want to take the rest to answer that question, because we're actually spending an hour in the information session. So we have 2 more information sessions scheduled next week. The list of dates and times is in the back, and it's also on the Guided Pathways website, which is at the bottom of that document. And if you pick up the big document actually lays that out for the teams that we're looking at and what we anticipate the purpose of the team to be, the roles and skills we need, the time commitment. Well, maybe not the time commitment like on a weekly basis. That partly has to be worked out by their teams, I think, as they're formed. If you're not able to make one of those remaining sessions and you want to talk about it otherwise, then please message either Jen or I or both of us. And again, our emails are at the bottom there.
Thank you.
Question? Skepticism? Criticism?
I looked up the transfer out information for iPad, and that's actually information that we provide on students with transfer out because that's the type.
Okay, so the Helen did a quick look for us. The transfer out rate does not specify on iPads what type of institution to transfer out to.
I wonder, are we seeing like a specific majors transferring earlier than others? And are we looking at, are we missing classes in our curriculum? And is that why they're transferring? Or, because I know there are some majors where like, for some schools might want to transfer earlier because we might not offer the introduction classes that they need.
So I'm going to say probably without question the answer to that is yes, but we're just now trying to get a sense of what students' intents are by trying to look at how many units are they concentrating in while they're here within a discipline to get a sense of what they might be wanting to go to. A lot of times what happens is that a student comes in, they indicate a major, they may have been working with somebody all along, taking good information and building a path to something that's not what they chose at the beginning. And so we have this disconnect a lot of times between that. So I think we're trying to figure out what are the reasons that students leave, especially the students that leave early. Obviously, what are the reasons? Is it because they're successful, or is it because we're not giving them something that they need? I don't know the answer. It's a harder one to get, but we are going to start trying to unpack some of that credit-taking behavior and course-taking behavior from students that are successful completers. Yes.
I actually have a question on the slide. You had the different degrees with the credits, average credits taken. I was just wondering if it was unduplicated degrees. So a lot of our students who earn an AAOT, they by default earn an AAS.
I'm going to say that they're probably, I'm going to guess they're probably duplicated. Well, are they unduplicated? Malloy pulled this for me, I think.
Duplicated, yes, duplicated. You were correct in your answer.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so these are not individual bodies, these are awards. Marge?
Yeah, I just want to call for time to provide this. We need the snapshots frequently. I've been to NUQ, U.S. Commission, several times now, and one thing I know for sure, we will be redlined. And here, we were on warning, remember? And you all worked really hard, we got us up off warning, but I'm very 50% red line for warning again. Even if, trying hard is, but it's not enough. You got to still show the outcome. So you really have to find out what programs are completing and push and try to push a little harder to provide whether it's more to try to find out if they're transferring. Is that not why they're, you don't give points for them being successful, but they took 2/3. Let's say you're in engineering and then you went off to OSU. We're happy for the students, but it's not considered a
Success.
so we question was good. Do we know what programs? It's going to have a program that we're intending on those, advising, I should say, and try to get those programs to complete. We're working against ourselves with these AAOT, ASOTs, where you finish and then leave. So we kind of have to work against the trend to get to completion. Other schools did it. They did it. We all saw the list. It's kind of hard to see where the bottom of the list. So we're going to have to work a little harder. It's not impossible. Sometimes it's just educating. It's just sometimes educating to the student the benefit of completing the degree. Some of you have been working on articulation agreements. The agreement is only step one. We're trying to acknowledge them as step two, and that sweetens the pot for completion. You know, there's a little bit of a reward if you go and complete with time. So these are all things that are helpful. We do have data that shows that our transfer students do as well as or better than native students. Do the students know that? Do the parents? I'm not so sure, but we have to make sure they know that. So that, just again, I want to applaud the work that's been done. Oh, we still have a ways to go.
Yeah.
Are we doing enough to capture reverse transfer opportunities? Students transfer out and then
Come back.
complete? Yeah. So.
No, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I mean, I think that we know we have a significant number of them, right? I don't know of any initiatives that we've done or anything to really try to target the group.
Yeah, so I can honestly tell you, that's a no. And you know why? Because it's work on our end. That's why these articulation agreements are so important. So OSU, UO, Northwest Christian, talking to all three of them, telling us we want that. Once they assign a person to do it, and we get in the system, we'll reap those rewards. So today, no, I'm not seeing that we have an organized unit. It's haphazard. That one's not on our end, it's on their end to work with us. So we're going to work on that because those numbers, we capture that as a leader. So that's a good point.
Right.
President Hamilton talks about getting that graduation rate up to 15%. You talked about at least 15% for standards. You talked a little bit about retention being a primary focus. And I think of the Mount Hood number about 64 and Atlanta at about 44. A 20% swing in retention. I mean, there are variables here depending on the amount of credits a student takes. But for budgetary reasons, that could be a swing of $4 or $5 million in retention if we have those students for that. So this is multifactorial. It's multiple areas of the college, not only including retention and student completion, but our graduation rates.
No, totally. And the ability to be able to, I mean, there's the student completion and the value to the student in completing. That's immeasurable many times. The value to an institution to be able to maintain programs and grow programs by having a continual set of students is impactful, right? If we look at, contrary to popular belief, maybe, I hate canceling classes. We should if we do our work right, we should never cancel classes, right? But not because they've got 3 or 4 people in them, but because they're the right classes and they've got enough people in them to sustain. How many of our classes that are if you look at second year curricula and some things, that's hard, right? I mean, so we need to keep, we're not going to, if we've got a 50% pass rate from one to the next, and we've got one section of 101 and one section of 201, and 101 has 30 students in it, and it's got a 50% completion rate, at the best, what's 201 going to have? 15, right? So we need to be able to do better at that. We need to be able to do better at that. I think to be able to continue to provide the necessary classes.
You know, there's a college, look it up, you can probably find it very easily, Union County College in New Jersey. It was a colleague of mine, and we're all suffering the same issues, but they decided to take one approach and hit it really hard, and that was with a phone call. They used the coaches, we've got coaches, but they smacked it so hard. They did calls, tracking, follow-up. It was almost like you had your own personal concierge. I mean, you just knew that coach knew when you weren't there. It quadrupled their success rate. I mean, I haven't looked at her success rate, but those phone calls, that follow-up, so any classroom teacher in the room, just having one-to-one contact. Where'd you been? Everything okay? that made all the difference. That was one school, that was the only intervention they did. And I think they hired the equivalent of 2 coaches. We have more than that here. We have more than that, but they hit it hard, they tracked, and I was fascinated when I would read data from Union County College. So we can do this. We can, but we're going to continue to mine data to find out where the gaps are.
And just,
Me and Carl are more on the recruitment side, so the whole conversation and exercise is part of the brain for me. It doesn't get a lot of run on the treadmill, but hearing all the statistics and stuff, and I haven't been here much longer than you.
yeah.
I came from the University of Hawaii, and I'm still learning which pieces of my 4 university experience can be applicable to community college and which ones are just not appropriate, don't fit. When we were there, we had a similar challenge where I think our 4-year grad rate was around 17%, and in 4 years it bumped up to 36. And one of the things they did, and I don't know where along the timeline this could potentially fall, was just an idea to throw on the wall, was they had a lot of, and there might be things we're already doing here, like a lot of safety checks along the way, where when they determined a path on the registration software that they developed in-house, there would be a drop-down menu of classes that you could register for.
Oh, yeah.
They went towards that. If you want to register something, you need a or something.
Oh, I see.
And then if you wanted to change your major, change your path or whatever, it worked like a GPS. It's called a registration GPS. It was really cool the way it was shown to me. I never used it. I used a piece of paper to register for all my classes, but it would show you not only how much longer you would be in class, but how much money it would cost you.
I've seen that. Yeah, there are some good products out there that when students build their shopping cart of classes right, it'll pop up right there.
Yeah.
If you were to only take X, you would finish this much sooner. Or if you take that, it's going to take you longer to finish, much more money. Yeah.
It's interesting the way that it worked. I don't know if that would potentially work for playing, but yeah, it seemed to
It
work.
could. I mean, you have to, that's a project, but the data are there. I mean, we have degree words, we have banner, we have, bits of information, different ways. We just got to get them all together in the right way. Yes.
When you were saying you were going to be offering support to help us, I mean, it's very clear that there's a need for a lot of direct contact with the student to keep, to help promote, higher retention.
Right.
I'm kind of curious how does that look to you in terms of supporting faculty, counseling? What would that look like?
Well, I'll give you Paul's dream, and I don't know without spending a lot of time talking with all of you how likely this is to be a benefit here, right? We have to rely on each other to provide the right information to students at the right time. We have to trust each other that we're going to do that. And we have to recognize and be willing to acknowledge that there are other roles on campus that can provide information at the right time to a student, right? So, I would love to have, we should have call it what you want, a student success team, whatever. It's interdisciplinary. You have faculty mentors, you have faculty counselors, you have student advisors, you have peer mentors, you have, you name it, whatever, right? That number and that, and we recognize what the needs are for students. We try to figure out what the needs are for students along their journey, and we engage members of that team to provide interactions with the students. That's from, a peer giving information, a classmate or someone who, a tutor that's another student, and, a counselor or an advisor doesn't have to give every piece of information to a student, right? A faculty member can provide some really good information as a faculty mentor to a student, but they don't know all of the options that are out there for students from completing a degree and so we have to train, recognize, and empower people to give the right information at the right time and trust that that will happen. And I think we also have to recognize that there's some technology helps that can happen with nudges to students automatically and things like that through email and text message and things like that are helpful. So that burden on any one person doesn't have to be great, right? And I think we have a lot of engaged people that want to help, and I think empower them in this support network for students.
Can I follow up?
Yeah, sure.
So, for example, I guess what I'm seeing is that sounds wonderful to me. And I'm wondering if you see like opportunities for training to be happening so that faculty and counselors know what each other knows and what they're doing, and that because the increased communication among all stakeholders is really exciting, but I'm just trying to figure out how in reality we're going to be able to learn what each other does so that we can trust each other and know what our boundaries are. And
We have to be willing to create that space to allow that to happen.
yeah.
And
Is that like
I'm committed to it, but I don't want to be the only one in the room. So I think there are opportunities for that. Yes.
Can I add to that?
Yes, please.
So one of the things that we're specifically looking to form soon, and so it's described in the document and we've been discussing, is like a cross-content area collaborations. And we'd like to get a group of people on a team who are interested in looking at how to do what you're asking, because I think just even figuring it out in the first place and setting up a structure that works is going to be a challenge, and there needs to be some real time and thought and consideration that goes into that. So we're actually looking to bring together a group to figure that out.
All right. Yes,
Yeah,
Katie.
We used to have a success and goal attainment committee that was, it had managers on it, it had support staff, it had faculty from a variety of areas. Counseling was very involved in the committee, and that was the committee that put forward our first free grant that we got. And it was not just allowed to languish, but it was demanded. And I think some of us who have been involved in that work were sort of shocked because it was great work that was done.
Yeah.
And then it was to a field and shot. So, and none of us we assigned the time to do it. We just participated because we were interested in trying to figure out how to make students more successful. And so I hope that there's some consideration for perhaps creating a similar structure.
It sounds worthwhile. Yeah, would love to. All right, my last words, it's happy hour. Just saying, Friday, 3-day weekend. Look, thank you all for coming. I am a realist. I know there are challenges, but I appreciate the opportunity to create spaces, to have conversations, and from those conversations, really put things in place that'll make a difference. And it's going to take all of us being willing to be part of that conversation to make a difference. So thank you for taking the first step. Continue along as we unfold the conversations on campus and opportunities to be part of the solution. I welcome it and encourage you. So thank you, and enjoy the long weekend.
Yeah.